But I've always thought that since I have the freedom of designing my own job, uh,
Mm.
I'm a professor of innovation. That means nothing and everything. So I can kind of choose what that means, and that means I can throw myself into various odd adventures.
And you mentioned there, it's really interesting. You mentioned there that you kind of went out, this great accident, not a full plan. And I love that because I really relate to it a little bit in the sense that sometimes you have to just put yourself out there. And you mentioned knocking on doors and all of this. How much do you think proactivity has had in terms of your success, in terms of making this career path?
It helps, obviously, proactivity to a degree. Balance, game of balances, though. Because, I mean, on one hand, if you're just continuously there trying to invite yourself into every party, you will be seen as a gadfly and as an annoyance as well. I'm sure that when I went trying to proactively get into somewhere, I did so knowing that I had something to contribute. I wasn't there just to kind of see that would be good for me. I did it so that I too could help them. I too could bring up value. I also made sure to kind of always be open to new conversations and new connections. I've done quite a lot of media in my time. I have a fair few friends who are journalists. After somebody asked me, how come you get some journalists kind of reaching out for interviews and so on? How can you kind of get into media that quickly? I said, I don't know really. So I called somebody who'd interviewed me a couple of times and said, why do you call me? Why, I mean, just honestly, I would want to know. I said, oh, don't you know, Alf? I said, no. Well, you're known in the business as somebody who will take anyone's call and will treat them fairly and not be a dick. So many professors put on airs and are arrogant and say, oh, you can call me in 3 weeks. I have a 15-minute slot on Thursday. And you'll kind of say, oh, sorry, I have to throw somebody out of my room, but sure, I'll chat with you. And I didn't know that. And I didn't do that kind of knowingly. I just thought that, well, since they've taken the time to try and reach out, I should take the time to take them seriously and treat them well, be nice to them. Same as when, well, you reached out. I was like, okay, she sounds nice. I'll chat with her. It, I think if you've had a strategy, it's sort of trying to be nice to people, in the sense that there's so many dickheads out there, who don't share their time and who don't kind of, so a
Uh,
little bit of niceness goes a long way.
I think that's so interesting, isn't it? Especially in the speaker industry. I mean, you're many, many years ahead of me there, but I also see it myself. There is sometimes a little bit of a, well, I'm a keynote speaker and my time is valuable. And, we've spoken about this before. I'm curious to know because obviously you have a lot of experience and you've sat on over 10 boards, which I don't think I've ever met anyone who sat on that number of boards. I would love to know, as someone who has been on the inside and seen so much, what is it that makes a business successful? That's such a big question, but from everything you've
Mm.
seen, what is it?
I mean, I've sat on successful business boards and I've sat on very unsuccessful ones. So it's definitely not some kind of magic trick, or as long as you have this person on, that everything will go fine. I think that often business success is also a game of chance. That is, I've seen brilliant founders with fantastic ideas flounder simply because the time wasn't right for funding, or they didn't get into the right kind of conversations. They didn't have enough seniority on the board to kind of create those linkages. And I've seen very kind of flaky ideas actually bloom because everything else seemed to kind of fit together perfectly. So often it is a game of chance. And I think that for founders and for people in the startup world, you sort of need to realize there is not one thing that's enough. It's not, it's a, fake it till you make it is a lovely slogan, but it's not enough. I mean, fake it until you make it and keep a keen eye on your cash flow would be a far better slogan, but doesn't really roll off the tongue in the same way. Uh, what board work has taught me, I think more than anything else, is the importance of questions, the importance of keep questioning. And this is not just, let's say, kind of somehow market myself. Oh, here comes Alf. He has a good question. I found myself on board, fairly comfortable, kind of basically just going through the motions, and then kind of slap myself and go like, "You're not bringing value here. You're not questioning even your own ideas. You're just throwing stuff out and see what sticks." So the best boards I've worked with have been not, I mean, they've been slightly confrontational, but with a degree of psychological safety. That is, they've not been the kind of places where everyone just agrees with everyone else and everyone's mates and buddies and just kind of sings from the same hymnal. Uh, but they've also been places where you can raise difficult questions and nobody kind of feels put out afterwards. Nobody feels belittled. And that
Totally.
balance is super difficult to hold.
It's that balance, isn't it, of having that psychological safety, but also creating an environment where people can challenge. And I think the best leaders I've seen are open to being challenged. They just don't want, yes, people around them agreeing with everything they say. I'm curious to know, for those watching this now who might be in the very early stages of their business or thinking about starting
Mhm.
a business, from your perspective, what would you ask them to focus on? Where should they really be prioritizing their time and energy?
Mm, Not on boards, that's for certain. I've seen so many startups with they had a really fancy board with really heavy hitters and an advisory board on the side of this and all this, and he was thinking about the two things that matter the most, which is the customers and the selling. I'm a big fan of sales, and I know that makes me sound bit like a spiv, a bit behind the curve. It's not sexy and stuff to talk about sales, but in every company I've seen that's failed, you can track it down to problems in sales. And every single company I've known that succeeded terribly well, there's been some amazing salespeople on board. And for my number one red flag is when I bump into a founder and ask, okay, so the sales strategy, oh, we'll hire some danger, Will Robinson. That's at the point where I kind of go, this isn't gonna. If you are the founder, you need to be the seller as well. Not so you should be not in the sense that you have to be the one knocking on doors, but you have to take sales personally. As in, you have to take ownership of how is this sold, how our relationship to customers, how do we actually deliver the value that we charge for. If you think that, oh no, I'm just here as a product manager and somebody else takes care of the selling, you really haven't understood what entrepreneurship is about. A founder needs to be a salesman or saleswoman, not first and foremost, but needs to take personal responsibility for
Mhm. That's so interesting. And okay, so if selling is one skill that you think every founder should have, I'm curious to know a little bit around creativity and innovation, because obviously that's the space that you lecture in. And some founders I've seen really nail this, it comes to them naturally. Others are incredibly techy and mathematical, and that is brilliant,
it.
but they lack creativity. So I'm really curious to understand how big a part does creativity have in terms of a founder's success?
Here I'm slightly contrarian and tend to say less than people think. That is, yeah, ideas are great. I'm in the ideas business. I can sit down with mates, give us the six pack, and we'll have 20 decent business ideas before the six pack is emptied. And some of my friends are quick drinkers. Uh, but that's not it. I mean, the idea is in a sense nothing. It's an opening into the world. It is a potential, but it's nothing more. It is execution of ideas that actually matter. So if I see a founder with a not very original idea, but tremendous execution skill, and somebody else with a fantastically interesting idea, but who lacks the skills of actually making that work in the world, it's number one I'm going to back every single time. It's creativity is important for us humans and so on, but it is also kind of overrated as some kind of magic pill. And
Interesting.
here comes, I often refer to, I mean, I write books. It's one of the things. Getting the idea for the book is delightful because it often involves a small amount of alcohol, some post-it notes, and a generally nice ambiance. Writing the book is awful. It gives me back pain and numb behind and me realizing that oftentimes my sentences don't work. It's not just weeks, it's months, even years of incredibly agonizing work. Yet that's the important bit. The idea for the book, that was the easy bit. Realizing the idea, that's where the magic lies. And I write daily, obsessively, continuously. Even when I hate it, I write because that's the only way I realize that my ideas can become real.
Hmm. Sounds to me then sales and execution, and not just execution, but consistency and consistently showing up even on those difficult days, which I'm sure every single founder has. Curious to know, and again, this may be a bit of a difficult question, but are there any industries in particular? Like if someone is watching this now and they've got four or five ideas that they've written down and they could down any of those routes. Are there any industries in particular that you would say are pretty hot right now, or indeed in 5 or 10 years will be kind of doing well, that a founder listening to this might be thinking, okay, Alf suggested this idea out of my five is probably the one to choose?
Yeah, it's a fun question because the answer to it will be strange, I guess. I read a tweet yesterday where somebody said, "Oh, the best education you can get right now is to get a job at OpenAI or a similar AI company." And this was immediately attacked by everyone saying, "Oh, so everyone gets a job at OpenAI then? Everyone could just walk into an AI company and get hired." When the reality is, these are some of the most difficult places in the world to get hired right now. You need incredible knowledge, incredible skills to even have a chance. So I wouldn't say AI, obviously, because everyone knows that. That's a pointless thing to kind of point to, because if you haven't kind of picked up that that's sort of a thing right now, they'll, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You have bigger issues. Um, I always kind of ask, where is nobody else looking? What is nobody else paying attention to? And I have kind of 2.5 points which I make over and over again. Like, I keep making them. I have for the last 15 years, and I've been right for those 15 years, and nobody is still rushed into them. Number one is aging. The number one mega trend, giga trend, even right now, isn't AI. It's a humongous trend, don't get me wrong. I research it and I'm very keen on it, but aging is still bigger. Our countries are aging at tremendous speed. We simply don't have the retirement systems, the retirement homes, the infrastructure, the urban infrastructure, the urban architecture, nothing in place for this tremendous demographic change. And when I tell this to a gang of new startup entrepreneurs, they all look at me with that kind of slight pity in their eyes, going, "Look at the old man go. I hope he dies soon so we can get some more fun people on stage." I'm kidding, but only ever so little. And I understand it Nobody wants to talk about the age or aging because that's not hip, that's not sexy, that's not cool. But it's a
But
tremendous business.
do you mean biohacking? Because that is sexy and cool. Is that what you're referring to? No, you're referring to
Necessarily at all. I'm referring to very basic things, such as let's look at the UK, because you're from the UK, so we know to know the UK a little bit. Who has the money in the UK? Is it the millennials? No, the millennials aren't on the property ladder. They're basically just waiting for their parents to die to get some kind of wealth in their life. Is it Gen Z? They can't even afford an avocado smash. It's not even my generation, Gen X. We sit in flats we own, but we're over leveraged and worry about our credit cards. Plus, we haven't saved enough for our pensions. Still the baby boomers who sit on all the wealth. Who create not just biohacking. Biohacking can be a fun thing, no problem with that. I'm talking about buildings. I'm talking about real estate. I'm talking about uh, assisted living facilities that are not basically just places where you go and wait to die. I'm talking about services and experiences. 68-year-old today, a 68-year-old is not at death's door. A lot of 68-year-olds are now wealthy. They're as energetic as they've ever been. They're slightly bored because they're just left their work. And they're kind of going, yeah, I can play only so much tennis. I need other things to kind of occupy me, which is why they're starting to emerge things for this group, but it's very small and it's very limited as of yet.
it's
But and
interesting.
also end of life services. We have not even started to scratch the surface of how we make a person's last 5 years their best 5 years. But we don't
So
talk about
interesting.
it because the elderly aren't
Mm.
interesting, or we at least so we assume.
Or perhaps it's also because founders maybe don't really relate to that, right? Because it's so many years ahead, and it's, a lot of founders I know, even including myself, when I created Imagine That, it was born out of my own experience and something I relate to. But what's interesting is that market, the boomers have the money. And if you're thinking about, as a founder, how can I find customers who have the money? That is a good customer base to go after. What's the other industry, if any, that you think founders should be looking at?
It's sort of a one and a half industry. Water infrastructures, including kind of wastewater management. I know. Can I pick anything less sexy? It is the dullest thing in the world.
Yeah.
And I use this partly to point at the industry, but partly to make a point. We've lived in an era of urbanization that is insane. Urbanism has become the one of the biggest drivers of everything right now. London is booming. Copenhagen is booming. The American cities are, well, not right now they're not booming. Right now they're being raided by ICE. But a lot of the big cities are booming, and water infrastructures have not kept pace anywhere. I live in Copenhagen, which is one of the kind of leading cities when it comes to water infrastructure. Our water infrastructure is creaking at the seams because we're talking such immense pressure on these things of keeping fresh water in the pipes, keeping toilets flushing. We just assume it happens by itself, as if by magic. Yet, if you look at Kuala Lumpur, 90%, 90 of their fresh water actually leaks out of their water infrastructure. They only retain 10%.
Really?
That
I
is true.
lived I lived there for a while. That's very interesting. Wow.
Dubai, Dubai has no and now I have to find a diplomatic term to use it. Sewage basically doesn't exist in Dubai. If you go and live in Dubai and wake up early enough in the morning, you might see a tremendous amount of uh, basically lorries with what looks like water tanks or sludge tanks driving out into the deserts. That's yesterday's sewage. They do not have a sewage system that can handle Dubai. Here, when you kind of talk about from very basic things, how do we make sewage systems more easily repaired? I know a couple of robotics companies are going in this, going like gangbusters because this is a huge problem and a huge potential.
I
But
think
and here
mm,
comes the actual point. Sorry to talk over you, but here comes the actual point. I don't point to water and sewage because it's sexy. I point it to highlight what has been forgotten. The elderly and sewage are not the same, but both are things the beautiful people, such as you and I, don't talk about because it's not hip, it's not cool. You don't get big speaking gigs, except if you're me, on the basis of such uncool stuff. Uh, but that is still where the big possibilities are. That's where the big propensities are.
it's so interesting, isn't it, Alf? Because when I ask that question, I mean, I think most people would give me the standard answer, which would be okay, AI or biohacking or something around communities and this type of thing. I think there's a lesson there more broadly, which is as a founder, don't just chase what is shiny and what everyone is going after. Actually, if you find an industry that I think you have to be interested in it, though, personally, I think as a founder, you should show some interest in that area. Don't just do it for the sake of it. But if there's an area or problem in a space that is less touched, like these ones that you've referred to, there could be a lot of money there. So it's really interesting. I would like to talk a little bit about keynote speaking, because obviously this is an area that you are very well versed in, and many of those watching this now will be wondering, how do I get paid to speak? How do I
Mhm.
begin? But before I ask you that, I wanted to first ask with a question, which is, can anyone be a keynote speaker?
I mean, I suppose you're always supposed to answer, of course, everyone can if they just dedicate themselves enough. But the real reality is, I don't think everyone can. The obvious bit is, of course, there are people who are morbidly shy or morbidly boring who simply cannot hack a stage. Then, and that's the bigger group, then there's the enormous group who simply won't do the work, who won't put down the effort to become good enough to actually be keynote speakers or big speakers. It's people think that, oh, I'll just go there and kind of tell a little story. Most people yawn at your stories when you tell them to mates. How do you think you're going to keep 3,000 people kind of sitting at the edge of their seats if you haven't finessed the story, if you haven't planned on how your voice works, if you haven't really kind of mastered the art, because it is an art of keynote speaking. So I don't think everyone can be a keynote speaker, but I think it's less about being loud enough or American enough or having broad enough smiles. It's about people not really wanting to do the hard work behind it.
If I ask you then, there's so many now people saying on their LinkedIn they're a keynote speaker, and as you said earlier, it's called fake it till you make it, and a lot of people are doing that. And what makes, and I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, good keynote speakers and exceptional keynote speakers. Keynote speakers who, they can present relatively well, they have a story, whatever, and then exceptional ones like yourself who get booked time and time again. What is it that makes an exceptional keynote speaker?
I think there are two types, actually. Uh, there are the types who simply just, by stint of charisma and stint of having such a perfect story, perfect narrative, can always entrance an audience. I remember Simon Sinek. I met him at a gig, and it's so fascinating because in person he was a bit, I don't want to say boring, but he wasn't very. He was a nice Jewish boy who kind of, I mean, of the American type, who listened nicely and didn't really interact that much. Uh, Traveling with his sister as well. And on stage, he transforms. On stage, he just becomes something else, and you can't take your eyes off of him. And he communicates incredibly well, and you can sort of feel he just has got that special something, that X factor. I know it's a TV show as well, but it's the best term I can use. But that's actually a very small group of top speakers who fully have that. The bigger group is the ones who have put down the work, not just into their own set, their own keynote, their own presentations, which tend to be kind of, they've really thought them through, they've worked on them, there's a lot of work there, but who also have the humility of, I'm not here as the big star, I'm here to make the event as good as it can be. That is, some of the best keynote speakers I've met are actually very giving people. They will reference everyone else who's been on stage. They will help juniors to do a better performance, because they know that if the whole of the presentation, the whole of the show is top, they will come out on top. So if you're not kind of a Simon Sinek or Tony Robbins kind of character, I don't know Tony Robbins. I've seen Tony Robbins and he scares me a little. Who are just kind of forces of nature. Uh, you need to realize it's a profession. It's a profession like the law is or medicine is. It has its dull points that you need to master. I spent hours with light setting crews. Do you know how boring light setting is? It's insanely boring. But then when I started understanding it, oh yeah, that's why you have a backlight and a front light, and that's what the stage light does. And I started realizing, oh, I've been standing too bloody close to the stage light. What an idiot. But that took hours of sitting with these experts in stage lighting to really kind of have that hope. And if there's anything I can tell, and we've had this conversation before, that's sort of what you have to put in the hours, not just on stage, but off the stage, of watching other performers. I still watch stand-up comedy on a way that's maybe slightly pathological, simply to kind of pick out things that, what do they do with their hands? How do they move their eyes? What is it that really sets somebody who can use the tiniest thing to capture an audience? It's what?
Mhm. Yeah. I really find that interesting. And something that stands out to me as well in terms of what you said is the part around being very giving and focused on the audience and the event. It reminds me a little bit of, I've spoken to people on this show who are LinkedIn experts and, with lots of followers, and obviously everyone's trying to build their personal brand. And they say to me, it's not just about showing up and me, and look how great I am, but actually, what are you giving to the audience and what value are you giving, and are you entertaining, inspiring, or something like that? What's really also interesting to me is, what you said around the lighting, something as small as that. No one listening to this now is thinking of it, but it's almost like a profession, as you say. So you've got to do the reps, and I know you and I have had that chat before. For anyone watching this now who's thinking, right, I'm a decent public speaker, right? I can stand in front of a stage. I'm not scared to do that. But where are these opportunities? I'm not getting paid to speak. What first steps would you give them?
Oh, you need to kind of think about how is it that you actually bring value to an event? Because a lot of speakers I hear when they start out, they tell the same stories everyone else has told. It's very important to take risks in life, or innovation is important. You kind of, who doesn't know this? Who hasn't heard this? So either you need to bring a personal story. I mean, you have a great personal story which you can really kind of build and show, if I could do it, what might you do? And that's a really strong way in. And then you need to lean into that personal story and really kind of mine it for what it has, and see how that can create value. The other is, how do I, in the setting I am, how do I tell something that is unexpected, but still brings value? I'll give you a little story. I know my stories tend to go on and on, but I'll give you a short little story. I was doing this IT conference in Budapest, and the closing keynote hadn't quite picked up what kind of conference it was, and I can only blame myself. I'd gotten it fairly quickly, I misunderstood something. I come there and I sit, day starting. I'm there listening to a couple of things before I'm supposed to go on. I realize this is a full-on nerd fest. This is not business and IT. This is not internet and business. This is not e-commerce. These are deep coders, all of them. I don't know any. I mean, I did some coding way back when I was a whippersnapper, but I don't know anything about modern coding. I can talk to business crowds. I'm completely lost. What the hell can I tell this group? I can talk about business models or how the corporation, but they're not interested. They want to build. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take a real risk here. I'm going to take a real chance of a lifetime, a risk of a lifetime. This could go awfully wrong. And I redo my entire keynote into this fiery attack on everything this conference had been about. I wasn't holding anything back. I went in aggressive. I joked about how the stage itself was basically a, a joke, and not a very good one. And I talked about how the world is burning and you're sitting here optimizing bloody iPhone app. Are you not ashamed of yourself? That was basically the theme of it. And I kind of went into this thing about how innovation, to actually matter, needs to really shake the foundations of the world. We need to make it meaningful again. I went back into the history of the region and about how kind of how the people had opposed the Soviet invasion. I went on. I've never gotten a longer standing ovation than I got that time. I've never gotten a better reception. I got something like 9.9 out of 10 when they did kind of stuff afterwards. I had people mail me afterwards telling me they'd resigned their jobs because of my speech, because I'd made them realize that they'd wasted their time and wasted their lives. At this point, I'm freaking out a little because, Christ, I was just kind of making a point. But I'm telling that story because that to me was the only way I could bring value there. I could talk about, hey, you know something really magical, but you know code, you can create these things, but what are you doing with it? And I
Mm,
went into kind of ethics and putting it to a big picture, and it created this sense that we've learned so much about this IT, and now we can remake the world. It gave the conference this explosive ending that, I think, got a lot of extra gigs from in the end, because people wanted me to redo it. And I tell that not to kind of say you should go out and try to start berating your audience, but sometimes you need to take that risk. Sometimes you need to kind of go on and test is value to this group.
mm,
And you
mm.
need to forget yourself. You're not the star. The star is, what are we achieving together?
So interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I love the point on risk as well, because risk is also important as an entrepreneur, let alone as a keynote speaker. And also, what you said there, it's been a big learning for me personally as well, is I think a lot of people kind of think and assume, well, I'm an expert in this space, I've got the creds, I worked at this company, I'm going to be great at keynote speaking, I'm good at public speaking. But actually, it's more than that. You have to find something that is unique right? And I think now more than ever, it's becoming harder and harder to find that unique angle.
And you need to do it also in your own. I mean, I know my voice. It's taken me years to develop my voice, so now I can use it as an instrument. But it also kind of requires, for instance, in your case, that people understand this comes from an authentic belief in something. That this isn't just I'm delivering whatever you want to hear. This actually comes from somewhere. This has an ethos to it.
So absolutely. And people really feel that energy as well. Yeah. Okay. So normally to end these episodes, I have some quick fire questions.
Sure.
And for someone like you, this might be tricky, but I'm going to ask you just to answer in one word or so. So, one word to describe your speaking career.
Surprising.
A
I didn't
book.
think I'd be here.
Okay, that goes back to what you said at the start about how it was almost like this great accident that you didn't have this. And I love that because I think a lot of people feel they need to have this structured plan. And actually, sometimes our careers can take us to really interesting places. Okay, so surprising. A book or a podcast that has changed your thinking.
Now I want to answer Talking Bottom about the great UK TV series Bottom, but that would be a little too flippant. I am a big believer in the power of fiction. I'm a big believer in learning from reading and reading the works of great authors. I'm going to say A Confederacy of Dunces, the great American comic novel about Ignatius T. Riley. I always return to that when I need a grounding and I need a way to reconnect with the absurdity of the world.
Brilliant, brilliant. And a daily habit that you swear by.
Writing. You cannot
Writing.
be a writer unless you write every day. I start my day by writing, I end my day by writing.
Just going to probe a little bit on that. And I know these are quick fire endings, but you mentioned writing. I'm a bit nervous because I see a lot of people now not writing. They're using AI to supplement that. Has that ever been a temptation for you? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I played around. I did a book not that long ago, which in which I also had ChatGPT generate some text or ideas and so on. So I've co-wrote written with AI, mainly to learn how it writes, and it writes badly. ChatGPT, even the best systems we have right now, and I pay far too much a month to have access to some of the very best systems out there, write in this anodyne, bland way. And for me, that's why we need to keep writing, because I write on a level that not the best AI system in the world can't live up to. But I only do that because I put in the daily effort. I start by writing, I continue by editing, I end by writing. Uh, Creative excellence takes work. And
Mhm.
in the age of AI, creative excellence is one of the few things left that we have that actually has value.
Yes, and also the stories that we have. I mean, you mentioned when you're
Mhm.
speaking, you speak on something that you connect with. I'm sure it's the same for writing as well. There are thoughts, ways that you put phrases and things that are very unique to you. And of course, you can use AI to try to replicate your language and your style, but it will always miss something. And humor as well. I mean, you will know this being humorous yourself. It's very hard. I mean, ChatGPT and AI, it's very hard to get that humor aspect right. Very interesting. Okay. And finally, so this show is called Breaking Boundaries. What boundary do you want to break next?
I am, yeah, it's an unfair question to ask a middle-aged man, but I think that the brown boundary I will break next will come next Saturday. Very simply because that's when I get married for the third time in my life, and I definitely didn't plan on marrying three times in my life. And I had planned that that boundary I would break would be that I, this time around, would actually stay in the same marriage until I die. It's not the most groundbreaking of boundaries, but these days, uh, staying in a marriage might actually be the most radical thing we can do. So that is my experiment that starts next Saturday.
Congratulations. I could philosophize on this more. I'm sure we could have a whole other discussion on that, but time is up. Alf, thank you so much. This has been really interesting. I always enjoy speaking with you. If anyone watching it feels like they want to follow up or learn more about what you do or work with you, how can they find that?
I'm very easy to find. I've made myself SEOable. So I'm search engine optimized up the wazoo. Just Google me. You'll find the LinkedIn, the homepage, the Substack, the whole kit and caboodle.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, it was great speaking to you. Thank you again.
Great talking to you. Take care now.